Hi everybody, this is Autistic Friday Symposium and I'm Kyriakos Gold. This panel is about autistic entrepreneurship, autistic cognition and business development. Straight to fairy godmother. Hello, Sharon.
Hello.
These are big words. Can you explain them for me? Especially autistic cognition.
Autistic cognition. So I think that's just a recognition that, you know, autistic people's cognition is different than what is classed as neurotypical, and it makes a big difference in business development. Because business development is usually, you know, taking a business planning or a business model canvas type approach. It's based on prediction. We like control. So it's kind of like you're predicting something and you're kind of like looking at it and thinking, well, this doesn't make sense because it's not real, it's not something I can touch sort of stuff, I can't control this. So straight away, the business development process, because of our cognition, there's a mismatch. Also, the research says that most autistic people are bottom-up thinkers. We're starting with all the data sets from our monotropic interest areas, where the business development approach is very top-down. Everything's framed and you're kind of like filling in the boxes. So for an autistic person, it's very from your interest areas, you're bottom up, you're making associations between all of this data that you've come together. We're really good at systemizing, so being able to take those associations and develop products we can do like what's called whole product solutions because we're thinking of it from every angle. So there's all these strengths from being autistic, but it doesn't match the business. Our autistic cognition does not match business development as it's traditionally done.
As you're saying this, I'm just trying to see if I'm fitting that description, and I'm not quite sure I do. But Christina, you are like the expert entrepreneur here. Does that make sense to you? Is that your experience?
Partially, I would say, because we're all different. Yes to the bottom-up thinking. So we focus on the problem and we don't get attached to the solution. The solution always evolves. I personally love agile methodology because, especially in development, it's in 2-week sprints, right? So in 2 weeks, we prepare on what we want to build in development and we don't change and we just run as intensely as possible and we build. But then underlying that, there's actually a roadmap as well as to what you know you might be building in the next 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. If you've got a bit of burnt out, you can also take the next 2 weeks offline as well. So it really balances the predictability and structure with feedback. And so I think from my perspective, the best thing about the autistic brain is that we're not tied to a solution and we're constantly looking for feedback, addressing customer needs, because it's all listening to what people need and want and then pushing that back into product development. Yeah, that's probably what I love most.
That, I think, described me. So, like, maybe there's some alignment here. Roo, what are your thoughts?
So I obviously work with startup founders day in, day out. And to be honest, they've all got pretty brilliant, interesting, exotic brains. But I will say, yeah, certainly autistic and neurodivergent folks are overrepresented in that group, and we know that from the data too. But I would certainly say that the out-of-the-box thinking and the ability to map disparate points and connect them in a way that other people aren't seeing for problem solving is really, well, it's compelling, but it's also what allows them to, you know, manifest, if you like, you know, interesting entrepreneurship kind of pursuits. And so it's a different kind of creativity really that I think comes through, and it's really perfect for entrepreneurship because we need these different thinkers to solve the great problems that we're facing.
So I definitely agree with the idea about getting attached to a problem and not a solution. I think we spoke about this earlier as well, like the constant feedback and constant evolving nature of what we do at Future Tech. We change every week based on feedback. So I think that's a real asset to be able to sort of constantly evolve like that and respond to challenging situations that are complex and constantly changing themselves. My brain definitely works in that systems way. So for me, actually, Future Tech was a system solution. I saw that the world had lots and lots of challenges, and I knew that I alone could not fix all of those challenges. And I knew that people with brains like my brothers could be the ones to fix those challenges. And so my system solution to all the challenges in the world became Future Tech, and, you know, uplifting these kids to be able to solve the solutions for us all. But I think it comes with unique challenges as well. For example, it's really, really hard to explain to people what is going on in my head a lot of the time. And so while I see all of the connections constantly, trying to get that out to other people, out to funders, out to the community can be really difficult. So learning how to sort of talk about things through different lenses has become really important for us at Future Tech, but it also kind of feels like we don't do it justice when we just talk about, you know, the outcomes and the outputs. I'm like, this is going to fix the whole world. Like, so yeah.
Sharon, what are the challenges and opportunities here?
I think part of it is, I think we've got to separate product development from business development, as if we're talking autistic cognition. And so the product development, that associative, that coming together, bringing things, being able to systemize, that's very product development. It's one thing to have a product, it's another thing to have a business, sort of stuff. So the business development part is difficult for autistic people, because you've got to bring a lot of stakeholders together on your journey through this, and the business development process is the part where traditionally you're making predictions. So I'm a big fan of what's called effectuation entrepreneurship, which starts off with what's your bird in hand, what do you have, which is, you know, often your monotropic interest, your support system. It's not based on prediction, it's based on what you can control. And it's got a principle of like crazy quilt and bringing different people together.
And just as a side note, what is monotropic interest? So
monotropic interest, you know, they reckon that autistic people have these passionate interests that they generally, the research says we're spending around 26 hours a week on our passions, and so they're interest areas where we have huge data sets because we're into them so much that we've got so many facts. You know, some people are I'm a fact data kind of thinker. Other people are visual thinkers, but we've got these data sets on our interest areas, and it's that we actually make connections between sort of stuff. So we're starting with that often when we're having a business. You know, we've got a passion area. We can see an opportunity. We've got this data set about this, and that's where we're making associations through it.
Christina, what are the challenges and opportunities as far as you're concerned?
I could talk on behalf of my experience. Lots of challenges with business development, which is why I've got, you know, advisors around me that help me either provide support or fill in those gaps. But direct communication is probably one, whether it's like straightforward remarks or just lots of questions because I need to really dig down into what the actual problem is. That in one instance, like I'm happy to do that in an open room because there's transparency and accountability, but it could for some people come across as like intimidating or, I don't know, inappropriate. And so there's this kind of notion about social norms, which is usually just, it's typical behaviors that society deems appropriate at a specific point in time, right? But when you look at history, societal norms changes because we recognize that there's an unjust practice here or something doesn't seem right. And I think when I went through my entrepreneurship journey, I did a lot of training where when you first meet someone, this is how you shake their hand. And I went through that training.
Almost like ABA in business.
Yeah, and We kind of fit in because we need to go through pitching, because I watched your thing for 2023. But there is a thing that you have to kind of go through in order to establish your business, fundraise, and then, you know, go out and market. I think it got to a certain point where I was like, why is it that I need to shake people's hand? Because if you start looking at from a cultural lens or an autistic lens, but there is all this training out there. The training is to get us to fit that mold though, not as a starting point, and then enable people to bring their lenses to go, is this actually appropriate? So to get others to see that it's just a different way of interacting. So when people go, autistic people are socially not great, or they don't have social skills, I challenge that. I just think we come into the situation in an unconventional way that's just different. So that is the thing that I've been struggling with. I know there's a traditional way of going about business development, but it does need to change.
And for me, you hit the nail on the head when you said culture and that the intersectionality of things. So imagine, and I'll give our example, like Christina on one side and me on the other side, like a darker, bearded man with a really intense voice. If we ask the same question, there'll be different levels of intimidation. In my side, that might be understood as aggression. From your side, it may be like there may be also be some gender deafness. So the other person might not even hear you. So that just makes things really, really difficult. And for an autistic person, you kind of say, but why? Like for me, it's like, but why? I don't understand why that's a problem. So, and no one really answers the why in our journey. And I think it's only now that we're having these conversations and understanding that you're not alone.
One of the biggest challenges I've had with business development is I value consistency in someone's actions and it aligning to the words that are coming out of their mouth. And when that is not there, I struggle because it's like, I don't understand what's going on here. What are you trying to communicate?
Also, but you said that in that meeting at 5:15.
And autistic people are great with pattern recognition. And so that consistency, whether it's that situation or across a time period, it really affects trust. It affects how I can actually work with someone. And it's never bad intentions from the other person. It's typically just the lack of self-awareness. And so that is something that I've also been tackling with as well, knowing that it's not bad intentions, but how do I reconcile with this inconsistency in behavior and words?
This is the panel that I want to be a panelist. But I struggle in terms of the notion of accessibility, especially in these leadership positions, because at this point, you are supposed to fit the mold. You're supposed to know exactly what to say, when you say it, and you're supposed to be professional because you're labeled as unprofessional if you challenge things. And I'm on this board, and I think the token autistic because this board's supposed to be super accessible. And I've actually been called unprofessional for just being myself. And I know I'm not. But the rest of that board does not understand that they're actually an inaccessible environment that is working in a super unprofessional way. How do you deal with that?
I sat on 3 board roles and got diagnosed with autism a year ago and was like, what the hell am I doing in a board role chairing a forum? Because being able to pick out cues, manage different personalities, have that kind of politics and then navigate it is not an autistic person's happy place, which is why upon reflection, I was like, I was so unhappy. And these were volunteer board roles as well. So I don't have an answer for that, but I can say that I have stepped away from all those board roles because it's not where I want to be spending my time.
So I'm going on a slight tangent, which I'm known for doing, but so something we do see not uncommonly is that the entrepreneur founder gets the backing, they build the business to a certain point. They often have the nutty professor stereotype kind of profile. They may be, exceptionally gifted academically and they're spearheading some STEM, business. And at a certain point in time, they've had to build a team up to a certain point, and then the dynamics of the team and the relationships become really complex, and the investors get concerned about, is this the person to lead for the next stage of scale up and take this business through to exit effectively? Now, this applies for neurotypical founders as well. So I want to be really, really careful about how I sort of frame what I'm saying here. What I do think is really, really interesting is that with the advent of AI, what we're going to be seeing is billion-dollar companies that have a founder and possibly just a couple of team members, like really small teams, and the ability to actually have AI agents who, meet your needs in terms of, personality kind of qualities. I don't think that means we don't still need to advocate for enabling environments, accommodations, and actually learn to build teams around us that work for us. But it's an interesting kind of thing that we're now on the cusp of facing that, we're going to be able to navigate that differently potentially.
It's super interesting that you said that, because Just Gold is certainly not a billion-dollar company, right? But this is made possible because of AI. Like, it allows me to communicate with different stakeholders in a way that they will make sense to the wickedness of the business plan, and just allows us to push things a lot further. So just a great point. And it's good to know that everyone else is going through it. And also on the data point, like when somebody, the trust is really important, I think, for my version of autism. When somebody gives you a different fact every time that you talk to them, well, it's actually not a fact then. It's like, the operational report has these 3 holes, and in the next meeting he's got another 4 holes. So like, how can I trust you to continue working with you? Sharon, I can see you've got something to say here.
I think it was just that Roo kind of like introduced it, the difference between entrepreneurship and management, like 2 really different skill sets. And I think autistic people are great entrepreneurs. I would say the management bit is a bit like, I won't own up to too many things, but like the day-to-day management can be difficult.
I think that management and leadership are very different. I think that I am an excellent leader. I actually give myself that pat on the back. The management stuff is really, really hard. It is really hard. Even when you have a team of people who have the same neurotype as you, it's really, really hard to get the balance between supporting people well and getting stuff done.
Dwayne Fernandez, Minds at Play, and I'm sitting here with Anita, and we're just nodding away going, crap. This is us. This is unfortunately us to the T, but for different reasons. And we're echoing what you're saying. But yes, advice on some of that area is that some of the rules that we put into place as we grew our business, Minds at Play, and yes, it's from the ground up, thinking about a problem and then solving it in a weird way, such as playing Dungeons and Dragons to help drive social growth on people on the spectrum. And from that, it became a case of, we have to move quickly and we have to move efficiently, but it can't just be the neurodiverse guy driving it. So autism, probably not. I'm finding out, I think I might have autism. I don't know. What do you think, Anita? But ADHD for sure. And so in this space, we found that we set a rule of 3 votes. We have a neurotypical in there. And if 2 people say yes, that's the direction we're going, and that helps us keeps us setting sensible directions and actually having that checked out. But at the front door of our business, we have a neurotypical translating the neurodiverse back into neurotypical for the wider audience, and that is some of the structure we put into it, right? Yes, we're going at the speed of light, but if the person who's blocking us from communicating to the wider audience can't understand us, probably means that the other side can't understand us too. So if we have to translate back to neurotypical before we get out the door. And so that's the interesting thing about building businesses. You need to have the right support, and it can't all be neurodiverse. It has to be everybody that you need.
I often say that we do need translators. I often say that, but it's that danger of your translator, of that relationship breaking down at some point. Sharon?
Yeah, I think because I have a bit of a few points with regards to neurotypical co-founder sort of relationships, and I think the challenge is not playing it safe and letting the neurotypical person have a lot of say in the establishment of the business and setting up the systems, so that you end up with a business that isn't accommodating. You've got your own business, but it's not accommodating autistic people because you're handing everything over. You know what I mean? Like that can come and bite you. You're losing control. Yeah, all of a sudden you can't do that part of the business, and you can't do that part of the business because it's been set up by a neurotypical person in a certain way, and all of a sudden you're finding yourself more and more removed.
Or you become codependent with that person because you've put so much trust to it and you've handed so much of the business, but when you realize that that's not feasible, then you actually can't control your business. Going back to your first point, that autistic people need that full control, which is just a cycle. Christina, I see you like thinking about this really hard.
I think it's that diversity and inclusion piece. Like when I did my EdTech startup, I had James, who's sitting over there, as an advisor. I think it depends. If you want a business, it might hit a ceiling because you've developed things in a certain way and it can only scale to a certain point. But if you want it to create the systemic change and want it to grow further, you have to involve all and know that everyone has their strengths, and it might take longer to come to different negotiations and decisions, but it's what's best for the business and the impact you want to create.
One on, I guess, getting support as an autistic entrepreneur. So I find that I'm at quite a high risk of being taken advantage of in terms of getting advice from external people. For example, going out to an accountant, I had no idea how much I should pay for an accountant. Like that was completely, news to me. So I think autistic people can be at a heightened risk. I trust everyone. I'm like, yeah, that sounds about right. Let's go. So I think, that's one thing around entrepreneurship. And boards, interesting. So I'm doing a diploma at the moment on governance, and I actually think that the traditional board governance structure is just the opposite of what autistic people think and understand in terms of how governance should operate. So you've got these people over here that kind of make all the decisions about the organization, which is here, and the only go-between between these two groups of people is the one person. And to me, that just seems ludicrous. Like it makes no sense whatsoever. So I think one of the things that I've been learning more about is Indigenous governance systems. And I think for me anyway, that makes much, much more sense. It's all about how do we work together? How do we hear everybody's opinions and come up with a solution? And yes, solutions usually take a lot longer to come to, but everyone is heard and usually the solutions are much, much better.
Well, in an ideal governance structure, the CEO is not just representing their thoughts. They have a strong consultative process, not only through the team, but also the client base and broader stakeholder map. But that's just the understanding that a really big business might have, and a medium-sized business or a small business or a not-for-profit might actually not. And because it's, full of community politics, and then it's just a very different state of play. Roo, you wanted something to say?
I think if you step back and acknowledge that autistic entrepreneurs have a very spiky cognitive profile, where that lands you is, all right, so yeah, it's that classic, what are my strengths and what are my weaknesses, and then mapping that out within your business and going, all right, so I'm outsourcing this to this person, I'm bringing this person in who, has this strength, and really just sort of sitting down and working out what your optimum team and support group looks like based on the fact that, you need to know yourself and your brain and your processing style at the first instance, and then work from there to kind of make sure you've got the right group around you.
Coming back to what you were saying, Roo and Kyriakos, about AI. So in Australia recently, a company has just appointed AI on their board, which raises an interesting point about, do you think, we're not going to discuss the ethics of it, but do you think that utilising AI as in an advisory role or is an interesting concept.
The fundamental problem with having an AI bot on the board from a liability standpoint, if not from many other standpoints as well, right? How are they ultimately liable?
If it's trained properly.
But how do they get held accountable in case of breach of director's duties? I think there's a whole...
Well, it might be an associate director, not like a director with voting rights. And it could also be a compass for the board because it would ask the really blunt questions without being blamed as being unprofessional.
I think, so for me, the role I think I could see AI playing, not just in boards, but perhaps in other, governance committee group type settings, is really just as a sounding board and as a perspective to feed in. There is, I forget the name now, but an AI that I know, I was reading something that someone was saying the other day, that they actually sat around and had wine with their husband one night debating ideas, and they had this AI enabled, and it was interjecting with its thoughts and perspectives and offering counterpoints of view. And I was like, oh, that's like having a cool dinner party, right? I really like that. And I do see AI, I mean, I already use it in that sense in my work, more in the written form, but I think we're going to see it evolving into, all but being like a person in the room, but a certain different perspective in the room. But on boards as an actual legal board role holder, office holder, no, for me.
Any technology is only as good as the information that's been put into it, right? And we know for a fact that many technologies are not necessarily considering, different abilities, different genders, different races, etc. In fact, a lot of data from the US anyway, is that a lot of facial recognition is actually quite racist. And, so I don't necessarily think, in fact, I definitely do not think that we should be putting the decision-making in the hands of technology that may or may not have been developed in a way that's actually inclusive.
Yeah. Well, may I just very, very quickly, just to that exact point, what I would encourage the autistic community to do is actually to develop autistic-informed AI bots that have autistic perspective on specific issues, and really the whole world should be consulting them.
But isn't by definition AI slightly autistic because of the way it literally interprets information? Like when ChatGPT started being heavily used, I realized that I can prompt like a mofo. And everybody around me was like, how can you prompt them? I'm just talking to like I talk to people. And now I'm actually seeing neurotypical people being conditioned in literal prompting, which I feel it will make our communication easier in the years to come. It's just a feeling from what I'm seeing. I don't know if it's right.
I actually, see, you're getting into special interest area for me, Kyriakos. I've looked into this a lot. Actually, AI, well, the language models anyway, are usually operating off of Bayesian algorithms. And Bayesian algorithm is a predictability algorithm. It was developed by a guy named Bayes back in the 1700s or something like that. And he wanted to figure out whether or not he could have an algorithm that would be able to come up with a solution based on very limited information and constantly update that information based on new data becoming available. However, when we apply Bayesian to the brain, Bayesian predictability mechanisms or theories, it actually, for autistic people, is kind of the opposite. So we get all of the information all of the time and consider it all. Whereas the way that AI is operating, it's going straight to the most obvious solution all the time. So I actually think that if AI robots take over the world, autistic people will be the ones to save it.
I think, I'm a heavy believer in design justice principles. Because
What does that design justice mean?
there's a whole design justice network, and it actually started off with it was led by I think the book was written by a transgender person who had this difficulty going through airports, and all of a sudden their body shape was not seen as what was supposed to go through the system, and so they were constantly getting picked up. And the principles of design justice is very much about how do we design for everyone, not for a specific norm sort of thing. And I think that the design justice principles, even with business development, and I guess this comes back to, you know, my concern about divvying up business processes for the neurotypical and the neurodivergent people in an organisation, is that everything should be designed in a way that more people can be included in all of the processes. And I think, you know, as someone who was involved in a tech business, and the tech that was designed wasn't accommodating for me, now I'm seeing that, you know, from the 1st of July next year to sell into Europe, your web-based solution has got to satisfy disability guidelines. So I think, you know, if we cater to something that, the neurotypical people can do that, eventually everything's going to be moving to more of a design justice. And I think we're in a really good position to actually look at inclusivity in all of the operations of a business, so that we can be inclusive of people who are wanting employment in different aspects of a business as well.
Bringing it back to like the entrepreneurship core of the conversation, Christina, I see you as a very successful person in terms of connecting with the right players and bringing considerable projects to life.
I'm even better at connecting the right bots and technologies.
So how did you do that before diagnosis, and has anything changed for you after the diagnosis?
I mentioned that as a joke, but it wasn't really. With COVID, I found that I was building out my team of bots to the point where I was naming them as well, because they formed part of an ecosystem in order to complete a work process from, you know, here to there. And it got to a point where I was enthusiastically talking about these different bots to my boss, and she's like, I think you have a problem here. We need to hire people as well.
No, I have a solution.
Yeah. But I got so comfortable because there are so many technologies out there. Two things. One, support network. I relied very heavily on reference groups and advisors whenever a social situation didn't make sense or whenever I struggled with it. And the second, which I don't know if it got surfaced today or in yesterday's session, but it's really hard. There's a lot of breaking down. There's a lot of weekends where I'm just out. And my partner cops a lot of it as well. It's really hard. And I mask with the support of my network. I figure out how to engage with society, but I always break down afterwards, and no one typically sees that.
I know that's going to be tomorrow for me, but after the diagnosis, has something changed? Has it become more difficult or?
Easier, yeah. So pulling myself away from groups where I don't feel like I need to be in anymore. Board roles in particular, I know I like to be, you know, on the ground, grassroots organisations actually doing the things, surrounding myself with people who think and work like me, and then allocating very specific masking time, because that is still necessary in order to function in life or to get my business off the ground. It's a very intentional schedule on how much time I give to others or situations.
Sharon, you've mentioned before that you've been in situations that haven't worked for you. With that understanding now, what's the advice you'd give to yourself a few years ago?
I think it's just such a changing landscape. You know, like before I felt like I couldn't expect the accommodations in all areas. But now I feel I can, because I think we're getting more acceptance that I can demand more of how I want to be in this world and not have to step back and say, okay, you take care of that because I can't do it. No, hold on a sec. I need accommodations and I can do it too. And I think I'm more prepared now to say that, that I want to play there as well, and I want to have control of the business, and I want to be able to play in the software. So we've got to change the contrast of the colours, know what I mean, sort of stuff. So I'm more prepared now to advocate for what I need.
Autistic Pride Day, the feedback for us was, do not use pride, it's too gay. Most of straight people said that. Most neurotypical people said that. It meant that we haven't been funded to the extent that we can grow this appropriately over the last 2 years. It is a love project. If this was a business project, where's the compromise line? And I will ask Roo, because you decide on projects that are, the value is in the millions.
I might be too biased on this one. Like, I personally think, and again, if we're allowed to swear, like, I'm proud as fuck to be autistic and I don't want to be anything else. And so I think this is grassroots. This is what we're all feeling. And yes, there's a disconnect, because does mainstream understand it, get it? Maybe not, but maybe we just have to keep going until they do.
Well, if you were to translate that in business where the stakes are higher, what?
But is this something you can compromise on when this is the heart of what the movement is about? Get the funding and crush the soul of what this is. To me, that doesn't make sense. But it may need some more thought around it.
So I talk about grants a lot. It's just because they really frustrate me. But I have often been given the advice around grants to do things like use their language and maybe just slightly change the way that you are going to run this program or the outcome that you're going to measure so that you can be more likely to get the funding. And for me, it really compromises like my values, like especially when a lot of grant opportunities are written in like a deficit focused way. But apparently we need to use their language back at them. And so like I've often struggled with that. You know, do I compromise on what I think is really important and write it in the way that I would write it? Or do I make it more likely to get the support that we need?
In the social enterprise, social entrepreneurship space, we're comfortable in Australia. We've got a pretty common definition of what social enterprise is, and we're kind of like using the term social entrepreneurship and social enterprise interchangeably. But if we go back 45 years ago, when the term social entrepreneurship was first coined, the definition back then had nothing to do with having a business. It was about creating systems change, and it was about social innovation. And if you look at the Skoll Centre for Entrepreneurship at Oxford University, they threw out their business planning competition because they wanted to go back to what the original meaning of social entrepreneurship was. And if I look at what's happening with Autistic Pride Day, this is social entrepreneurship. You're going for it, whether it's a business proposition or not. You're going for it because you're creating systems change, you're being entrepreneurial in how you do it. I think there's a big difference between being an entrepreneur and being a small business owner.
Like, I think there is an enormous number, well, we know there are an enormous number of very successful autistic folks in high places with a lot of cash, and that they haven't necessarily been diagnosed, and they haven't necessarily kind of tapped into what this movement is all around. Their kids are being diagnosed though, and their grandkids are being diagnosed. And I think there's an interesting piece there, because there are autistic folks with power and money, and they need to become part of the conversation. And I'd actually say for next year, why don't we have a panel of, I won't name names, that wouldn't be right, but I know some, incredibly successful high profile autistic Australians who really should come into this conversation. And that would be interesting in terms of what it might do for something like this financially.
Rather than turning this into a mentorship session for Autistic Friday, because you three are in our advisory board, and I really love you for all your support. I wanted to close the session with advice to a younger autistic entrepreneur. What would be the first thing that you'd say to them, Sharon?
currently there isn't business advisory services that are actually developed recognising autistic cognition, but I would say it's coming, and it's coming really quickly, and it's coming. So just hold your ground, and that support is coming.
What I want to see is actually venture studios for autistic folks. So venture studios already exist, and they scaffold around the entrepreneur to provide tech support, marketing, whatever it might be. I think if we had that specifically for autistic entrepreneurs, that would be very powerful. The other thing I would say is growing up autistic means that every day you are practicing resilience, because it's required to get through the day. And if you don't know that you have the most incredible skill at your disposal right there for entrepreneurship and to get you through, stop and reflect on that for a moment, because it's very powerful.
Oh yeah, venture studio, yes.
And within 2 weeks, she will have one ready for you.
I would say reach out to someone who you know is autistic and start there, because they will help you get to the next place and then the next place. I know one kid, when I did my ed tech, he ended up doing the whole UX of my platform, and I think year 10 kid came to me and was like, I redesigned your platform, can I get a job? I don't need to be paid. But because of that, he came in, we paid him despite not having experience, and he, when we secured the $1 million, it was based on his designs. So I think I will always, no matter what young person comes to me, if it's not my business or what I could do for them, I will point them in the right direction, and they can always come back if they feel like they've reached a dead end. Our network is pretty strong, and autistic people are incredibly giving.
And speaking of giving, there will be a donations link, our Raisley donations for the digital event, so we can continue doing this work throughout the year. I'm Kyriakos Gold, and this is Autistic Pride Day in Sydney in 2024. We'll see you soon.